Hey, do you ever feel stuck in a relationship? Like it's just not moving anymore? Maybe it feels a little bit cold. Maybe the same pattern keeps playing out with a spouse, with a child, maybe even with one of your parents or a coworker. Or maybe you've had that experience when you're out with people you know, but the conversation just kind of dies and it gets really awkward. Or when you're meeting someone for the first time and it's just uncomfortable, like you don't really know what to talk about next. Well, today I want to show you a skill. And by the way, the good news about skills is that what keeps us stuck usually has to do with skills, and skills can be learned and implemented and built over time. Think of that. Your breakthrough is often just on the other side of a skill. And today I want to show you a skill that can get your hardest relationships moving again and take your best relationships even deeper, as well as if you're in the marketplace, make you stand out with employers and peers. In fact, today I want to give you 3 levels of conversations that you can use as a gauge of how well or how deep or how genuine yours are. And then the specific skill that can take your relationships, and by the way, your influence even deeper and make you memorable at the same time. In fact, I'll show you examples toward the end of today's episode of how specifically to use this skill. Why? Well, remember, we are only as strong as our support system. We are only as resilient as our relationships are strong and quality. One component actually that I guide my private coaching clients through is how to cultivate connections with God and with others, because our emotional health, our emotional freedom and resilience depends on the quality of our relationships. Just a few years ago, I was at a holiday gathering and I realized the power of the skill that we're going to talk about today. One of my brothers-in-law, who is very hardworking, who is a man of faith, who's a great father to his daughters, he was working and I told him in the afternoon, hey, I want to hear what some of your insights about this particular thing that you've been working on for a couple years are later on tonight. And so I gave him a question, I gave him time, and what's really interesting is later on that evening at dinner, he started telling me all kinds of lessons that he's learned. The project that he was working on was starting a business. And later on, my sister came to me and said, I've never heard my husband talk so openly about that. And it was all in the power of a well-placed, well-timed, and a sincere question about something that honestly he was interested in. Now, what was the unlock there? A good, sincere question. In fact, I think it was Dale Carnegie in his book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, who said the most interesting people are the most interested people. In other words, when you ask a good question, the kind that someone says, I've never thought about that before, or I've never been asked that before, or when you ask about something that someone is very invested in or passionate about, it's then that the conversation unfolds. Jesus was a master at questions. He knew that a good question invites connection, and he wanted relationship with the people around him, with his disciples and with others around him. That's why he invited himself over to people's house like Zacchaeus for dinner sometimes. He also knew that a good question can inspire reflection. He used it as a teaching tool. When people would come and honestly try to trap him sometimes with questions, he would respond to a question with a question. That's a good coach, by the way. He wanted people to reflect. What did the law and the prophets say, for instance? So he knew that a good question invites connection. He knew that a good question inspires reflection, but he also knew that a good question can instigate direction. Well, who do you say I am? He was directing his disciples to a conviction about who he was that would lead to action about how they lived. Jesus knew the power of questions. They invite connection, they inspire reflection, they instigate directions. So what is it that keeps us from asking better questions to cultivate better connections? Well, one reason we don't ask better questions is because of past modeling. Some of us did not grow up in homes where there was a lot of interested conversation or engaging questions to one another. We just didn't see it modeled growing up. Now, others did. I remember my parents regularly hosted missionaries in the guest bedroom, and when they were in town for a conference or for some event, around the dining room table, we would actually hear stories of their adventures in Kenya or New Zealand or South America, and it was so fun. And honestly, it really shaped me, I would say pretty profoundly. But even though that was modeled for me, here's what I want you to hear, whether this was or wasn't modeled for you. I still had to learn the skill of asking good questions and then actually listening. In fact, I got this way wrong in college. I remember a couple times literally asking questions, knowing that my motive was hoping they would ask the same question back to me. Think about that. I wanted to lecture and show off more than actually listen and grow. Don't be like me. Whether or not you had it modeled or not, don't be like me. Ask a question to actually listen. So, one reason that we don't ask better questions is we just didn't have the modeling, but we can develop the skill. And the second is present conditioning. Believe it or not, we live in a time where there is an ancient art of conversations that is seemingly harder and harder to discover. Carey Nieuwhof, author and leadership expert, he made the observation that we are conditioned by social media. Now, he doesn't demonize it. I don't demonize it. Social media can be a great tool when used right and when we are critically thinking as we engage in it and really look to connect with others. But in general, as a general observation, social media has really led us to just kind of give status updates. So I don't know if you've been out to dinner with friends or hanging out with your friends, and it's like someone talks about something and they just kind of give a status update of how things are going in a relationship, or oh, did you hear this and this happened with these other friends over here, or this relationship over here, or a status update about things at work. And then oftentimes, rather than somebody asking an engaging question, someone else will just offer another status update. And it's like we just have gotten conditioned to giving status updates and not really asking engaging questions and following the conversation. Good conversations are volleys back and forth. But here's the good news. Again, good questions and good conversations are a skill that can be learned, even if we are very conditioned right now to just give status updates. So sometimes it's past modeling, sometimes it's present conditioning. But here's another reason that sometimes we don't ask good questions, and that's internal pride or fear. What do I mean by that? Well, we don't want to look like we don't know something, and we don't want to look like we're just kind of prying. And so our fear of looking like that keeps us from asking good questions. Our fear of, ooh, maybe they're going to think I'm annoying or prying keeps us from actually engaging. But here's the truth, and this is pretty mind-boggling. The truth is we are constantly asking ourselves questions. Have you ever noticed that? Even my examples, oh, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think I'm annoying? Are they going to think I'm prying? Those are examples of questions that we ask ourselves all the time. We ask questions of God all the time. So it's not that we don't know how to ask questions. We just need to know how to ask better questions and ask them out loud. Think of this: maturity, whether it's emotionally, whether it's socially in our relationships, our emotional intelligence. That kind of maturity requires that we ask better questions of ourselves and of God, and really ultimately of others. Instead of saying, what are they going to think of me? Asking questions like, what is my motive for wanting to know this? Or how could I serve this person right now? What's the greatest value that I could add? How could I be really present and really listen to what's being said or what's not being said? See, those are all questions that we ask ourselves, even questions that we ask of God, in order to ultimately be more present in a conversation. So we're always asking questions. We just need to ask better questions. And that helps us get over the internal fear or the pride. Now, what I've noticed is that there are 3 levels of conversations, and this is a good way to gauge the quality of your relationships. The first level is this: facts. When you're getting to know someone, what's the first question you ask? Well, what do you do? Where are you from? Oh, I'm a lawyer. Oh, I work as a nurse. Oh, I'm a therapist, or whatever it is. And we can let the conversation die, We say, give a status update. Oh, I had a cousin who was a lawyer once. And that's it. And we walk away. Or we could take it to the next level. So level one is facts. The next layer down is feelings. Feelings has to do with, well, what's the most interesting thing about what you do? How do you feel about it? Now, I want to ask, how do you feel about it? Because that's just a really therapist-y question. And I'm not interested in asking that question. But I am interested in getting at what is someone's experience like of the thing that they do, or of maybe certain relationships that they have. So, wow, 5 kids, that's great. What's that like? I'm not asking how do you feel about that, but I am getting a sense of their experience. So there's facts, layer one. A layer deeper is feelings. And layer three is formation. Now, this is really getting into the backstory as well as the present story at the deepest level. In other words, what are the things that have shaped a person up to now? And what are the factors shaping them now for who it is that they are becoming? This might be getting into stories, sharing either wounds or growing pains growing up, or sharing hopes and dreams at the present moment of what it is they want to accomplish, or who it is that they want to become, or what kind of, say, family that they want to have, or business that they want to have, or part of their life that they want to develop. And actually, when you're in a conversation next with somebody in your life, a coworker, a family member, I want you to pay attention to the level that you're talking at. Are you just kind of sharing facts? Or are you sharing what the experience is like of those facts? Or are you actually getting to the heart level, the formation level of how it is that you got to today and who it is that you're becoming? That's a great way to gauge the quality of your relationships. So, what is the one skill to build better relationships that you can implement today? And it's this. It's to ask better questions. Sincere questions. Not weird, not awkward or prying questions, but questions that communicate that you are genuinely interested in the other person. How do we do this in an effective way? Well, I want to give you 3 keys to this and then some examples, and then we'll be done. But the first is we want to pay attention to what's important to the other person. Pay attention to what's important to the other person. There's a story of a man who worked for a large company for a number of years, and he tried to see the CEO. He just had this one idea he wanted to share with the CEO. And of course, the CEO was busy. Finally, the secretary calls him in and says, hey, you get 5 minutes with the CEO today. So this man, who's not a high-level executive, but just someone who works at a little department way down in the company, he walks into the office for his couple minutes with the CEO. He notices a picture of the CEO with a fish on the wall. He says, so, you like fishing? And those 5 minutes turned into a 2-hour conversation. Why? Because he asked a sincere question. He showed genuine interest and honestly, probably unlocked what the CEO wanted to talk about, but really didn't have a lot of people to talk about with in his life. It happened to be this guy who asked the right question. So in order to do this well, we want to pay attention to what's important to the other person. But here's something else that I've learned in order to not make this awkward or prying, is you want to put the engaging question after an engaged statement. So it doesn't feel like your interrogation, like one question after the other, but it's actually broken up by an engaged, honest observation. So for instance, you might say, wow, 5 kids, that sounds like a real adventure. What's that like? And that way, you show that you're interested. You show that you're thinking, that you're engaged, and not just asking empty questions. And it invites the response of the other person. Researcher J.R. Briggs, who actually just recently wrote a book about asking better questions, he says thoughtful, engaging questions actually lead to thoughtful, engaged responses and conversations. So we want to show that we're interested by making an engaged statement and then asking an engaging question. And here's the third way that we ask better questions, but it's to make it your goal to actually ask the person something they've never been asked before. That goes from curiosity to sincerity. That is helping make them feel seen, known, valued. So here are some examples to do this. Here's a good one for spouses. If you show up and just ask this question, hey, how could I serve you today? It would change the quality of your relationship. You could ask, hey, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? Or you could actually ask that person for advice about an industry that they're in or a passion that they have, like I did with my brother-in-law. Another way is to ask, what is the toughest decision you've made this year? What's the best purchase you've made this last year? That's always a fun one too. What's a lesson that you've learned recently? How do you feel like you've been growing? Or what's a challenge that you've been facing recently? Here's another good one. What do you think people get wrong about you most often? And finally, here's one for parents. I learned this from my sister. But after making an engaged statement, you ask the question, and it sounds something like this. Hey, I know you had gym today, and I know you had mac and cheese for lunch. Tell me something I don't know. Now, technically, that's a statement, but it's inviting a question. And it's allowing space for whatever the child wants or the teen wants to tell you about his or her day. Here's another great one for parents. What's something that you learned today that you did not know when you woke up? These are all really great examples of questions to go from just kind of facts and what the experience is like to actually formation at the heart level, at the mind level. What is someone thinking, their hopes, their dreams, they're growing right now, and who it is that they are becoming. You have influence in your relationships. You don't control other people, but you have incredible influence over the quality of the relationships in your life. So, friend, break through what's stuck by asking better questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube, put in the comments, what's the best question you've ever been asked? Or hey, if you want to, what's the most awkward question you've ever been asked? That'll be fun too. And if you want my personal help cultivating better connections is one of the 4 main components of the emotional freedom framework I walk my private coaching clients through. Well, I want you to go to peacestartstoday.com. I got a free training there to help you jumpstart your emotional freedom. Remember, friend, Jesus modeled good questions for us. They invite connection, they inspire reflection, and they instigate direction. You have influence over your relationships. God gives you that like today. You got this, friend. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.